Hello, welcome to Primary Sources for Fun and Profit. My name is Catherine Koltoff and I will be your instructor today. We've got a limited time and a lot to cover, so let's get started. First, how about a show of hands? How many of you have had some sort of introduction to primary, secondary, and tertiary sources? Alright, and how many of you feel confident about using primary sources in your work? So there's a good number of you. Well, if you're feeling confident, I'm sure you won't mind a bit of a review to make sure we're all on the same page. So here are some definitions Cornell University provides that attempt to cover the three source types. These definitions are, for the most part, effective and are pretty much the standard for most texts. But as we will be discussing later, they can be somewhat misleading, as in practice primary and secondary sources are often determined based on numerous other considerations, such as distance from primary observer or writer, context, usage, and other mitigating factors that may vary by field, topic, and even the spin of your own arguments. Yeah, it gets kind of crazy. The same source in one essay might be a primary source, while in another it would be a secondary source. Therefore, these are neither definitive nor even necessarily accurate. Even a source generally considered tertiary might be theoretically used as a primary source. However, the situations where traditionally tertiary sources can be used as primary sources are a lot easier to identify than they are for secondaries. Of course, there's more to primary sources than just the sources themselves. Just to be clear on your knowledge, where do you normally search for primary source materials? Libraries, the internet, any others? Okay, let's outline a few more. We'll go back to these in more depth later, but here are some of my favorites. You hit on quite a few, but have you ever thought of yourself as a primary source? I'm just going to take your silence and meowing as an expression of enthusiasm. But seriously, if you're the eyewitness, then yes, you can be a primary source. Historically, many of the great ancient writers, travelers like Marco Polo, Strabo, and Herodotus, whose writings survive, were themselves witnesses. So really, they were among the earliest primary sources to use themselves as their own primary sources. And guess what? This carries over into other strategies, too. You can do your own legwork. Go and document the object or place in question yourself. You can conduct an experiment, see if something works in practice, and record the results. So scientific research, when reported by the researcher, is a form of primary source. Both of these do have their drawbacks, and will probably need a bit more documentation and work in other ways to do this. So it's less common outside of the named sciences, but it can be done, and is accepted. Of course, most of this has been reviewed to you so far, I hope. But there are a number of reasons to go further into this. The first reason is that as there are more sources that would qualify as primary sources than is normally envisioned, this gives you options in your writing. Next is that a greater grasp of how to find and deploy primary sources will help you get past roadblocks in your research and writing. It probably shouldn't surprise you, but having a variety of different sources, especially primary sources, can make your arguments and your writing more interesting. And lastly, it strengthens your own argument to go with this. After all, the more varied the opinions you have to back you up, the greater the strength of your argument, right? Well, not always, but more often than not, it will help you to convince your reader if you apply them correctly. There are other reasons why you should consider studying more about primary sources. But I think that's enough introduction for you all. Shall we move on?